I've been up since 6. My phone's been buzzing nonstop. Vendors confirming deliveries, a florist asking if I prefer blush roses or ivory. I told her either. It doesn't matter. I've planned this wedding alone since the day I could afford to dream about it. The sunlight spills through my apartment windows, painting gold streaks over my desk stacked with folders labeled venue, catering, budget. Everything has my handwriting, my calculations, my effort. No family contributions. No dad's card. Just me. I sip my coffee, smooth the silk sleeve of my blouse, and glance at the mirror across the room. My reflection looks calm, maybe even proud, but inside, I can still feel the echoes of every night I stayed up working shifts no one noticed. Every milestone I celebrated quietly. Then my phone buzzes again. This time, the name on the screen freezes me mid-breath. Mom. It's been months since we last spoke, since I told her I didn't need help. She never liked hearing that. The message is short. We'll be in town early. Thought we'd stop by to see how you're managing things. I can almost hear her tone through the text. Curious, doubtful, maybe even pitying. I set the phone down gently, take another sip, and smile to myself. They have no idea what's waiting for them. I was 16 when I realized that family support wasn't something everyone got, at least not the kind that lifts you up. Back then, our house smelled like burnt toast and cheap cologne. My dad worked construction jobs that never lasted, and my mom had a talent for making guilt sound like concern. Money was always tight, but pride was never in short supply. I remember the day I got my first part-time job, a cashier at Miller's Grocery, 3 blocks from our house. I came home with my uniform still creased and a paper schedule in my hand. I was proud. Mom didn't see it that way. You should be focusing on school, Ava, she said, folding laundry at the kitchen table. We're managing fine. Managing? I laughed softly. Mom, we haven't paid the electric bill in 2 months. Her jaw tightened. Don't get smart with me. We'll handle it. But we always meant me, somehow. When my first paycheck came $184 after taxes, I held it like it was made of gold. My hands were shaking. It wasn't much, but it was mine. My dad walked past me, glanced at the check, and muttered, "Don't go thinking you're some kind of hero now." That stung. More than I expected. That night, I sat on my bed and stared at the tiny silver keychain my grandmother had given me before she passed, a small heart with the words, "Earn your peace." She was the only person who ever told me I was capable of more. So I made myself a promise. No matter how long it took, I would earn my peace. I would never depend on anyone who made me feel small for wanting more. From that day, I stopped waiting for approval. I picked up extra shifts, saved every cent, and told no one. The next time the lights stayed on after a missed bill, Mom said, "Guess they didn't cut it this month." I didn't correct her. Some victories are meant to be silent. I left home at 19. No dramatic goodbye, no tears, just a quiet morning, 2 duffel bags, and the sound of my mom still asleep on the couch. College was supposed to be the dream. For me, it was a battlefield. I worked mornings at a diner, classes in the afternoon, and evenings restocking shelves at a bookstore. I used to keep my tips folded inside a mint green envelope labeled next semester. Every dollar had a purpose. Every hour had a cost. Sometimes I'd watch the other girls in class, the ones with manicured nails, Apple laptops, and families who visited on weekends. I wasn't jealous, just aware. Their lives looked effortless. Mine was a series of calculations. There was one person who noticed, Marjorie, my manager at the diner. A woman in her 50s, gray hair always tied in a bun, lipstick slightly smudged but smile always kind. She once caught me dozing off near the register after a double shift. "You'll burn yourself out, kid," she said, sliding me a cup of coffee. "I don't have much of a choice," I murmured. She tilted her head. "You always have a choice. Just make sure the one you pick is building you, not breaking you." I didn't forget that. With time, I learned to balance, not perfectly, but enough. I applied for scholarships, wrote essays during lunch breaks, and found small ways to make progress. My grades improved. My savings grew. By graduation, I had something most people didn't expect from a girl who came from nothing. A degree paid entirely in cash. No loans. No help. No guilt. After college, I landed a job as a marketing assistant at a local firm. Entry-level, long hours, modest pay, but it was mine. I showed up early, stayed late, volunteered for everything. And when a senior position opened 6 months later, I applied even though everyone told me not to. I got it. From there, everything changed. The late nights turned into promotions. The paychecks grew heavier. I moved into a small studio, then into my own apartment with a skyline view. Still, I kept my success quiet. When Mom called, I'd say, "I'm doing fine." When Dad asked if I needed anything, I'd say, "No, I'm good." And I was. I didn't post pictures of vacations or fancy dinners. No one knew about the emergency fund, the investment account, the savings I built brick by brick. But every night before bed, I'd open that little silver keychain and run my thumb over the words. Earn your peace. I didn't know it yet, but peace wasn't just financial. It was the freedom to stand on your own, even when no one clapped for you. I knew they'd come early. My parents were never the call before showing up type. By the time I heard the knock on my door, I'd already set out the coffee mugs and a plate of croissants I didn't plan to eat. When I opened the door, Mom stood there in her usual floral blouse, clutching her purse like it was armor. Dad hung back, sunglasses still on even though we were indoors. "Wow," Mom breathed, scanning the apartment. "You've done well for yourself." There was surprise in her tone, and something else, confusion. Like she couldn't quite piece together how I could afford the tall windows, the art on the walls, the quiet hum of a city view that cost more than a down payment back home. "It's nice," I said, simply motioning them in. "Coffee." They sat stiffly on the couch while I poured the drinks. My desk still had my wedding folders spread across it, color-coded, budgeted, finalized. Mom's eyes went straight to them. "You're really handling all this alone?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "Have been since day one." Her brow furrowed. "But weddings are expensive, Ava." "I just assumed that I'd need help," I said, a small smile tugging at my lips. Dad grunted. "Nothing wrong with a little family support. You shouldn't have to do everything yourself." I turned then, slowly, meeting his gaze. Funny. That's what I thought at 16. Silence. The kind that fills a room and makes every heartbeat sound too loud. I walked over to my desk and picked up the silver keychain lying beside the budget folder. The same one Grandma had given me years ago. "When I started working, you both told me I was wasting my time. That I should just focus on school, that you'd manage. But when the lights went out, when rent was overdue, when I needed books, there wasn't anyone managing anything." Mom shifted uncomfortably. "We did the best we could, Ava." "I know," I said softly. "And so did I." I gestured around the apartment. "Everything you see here? The degree framed on that wall? The job that paid for this place? I built it. Every bill, every tuition payment, every credit card, paid in full by me. I didn't ask for a dime." Dad's mouth tightened. "You're saying we were bad parents?" I shook my head. "No. I'm saying I stopped waiting for someone to rescue me." I opened the folder marked wedding budget and slid it across the coffee table toward them. "Here. Every expense is covered. Venue, catering, photographer, even the honeymoon. All paid. No loans. No credit. No help." Mom blinked at the pages, her lips parting. You paid for all of this? By yourself?" I nodded. Every bit of it. For the first time, they looked small in my world. Not because I wanted them to, but because for so long, I'd been made to feel smaller than I was. Mom's eyes welled. Dad looked away. And I felt something shift, like the ground between us finally leveled. They had come expecting to see their struggling daughter, the one they could still advise, still doubt, still help. Instead, they met the woman who never stopped helping herself. I sat back on the edge of my chair, hands folded calmly. "You know," I said softly, "I didn't do any of this to prove you wrong. I did it because I wanted a life where no one could decide my worth but me." Mom reached out, voice trembling. Ava, It's okay, I interrupted gently. You don't have to explain. I just wanted you to see it. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was full of truth. For the first time, they weren't speaking, and I wasn't apologizing. The air in the room felt different after that. Not tense, just heavier. Like the truth had finally filled the space between us that had been hollow for years. Mom set her coffee down, her fingers trembling slightly. Ava, we didn't know. You never said anything. I smiled faintly. I did. You just didn't believe me. She looked up then, eyes wet, voice small. We thought you'd come back one day, maybe ask for help, maybe need us. I breathed out slowly. That was the problem, Mom. You kept waiting for me to need you instead of being proud that I didn't. Dad cleared his throat, the sound gravelly, uncertain. So, what now? You gonna throw all this in our faces? I shook my head. No. That's not who I am. I stood, walking toward the large window overlooking the city skyline, sunlight spilling across the floor, catching on the edges of my white wedding planner binder. My reflection stared back. Not a bitter girl, not a victim, a woman who'd earned every piece of her peace. When I turned back to them, my voice was steady. I'm not angry anymore. But I do have conditions, not for revenge, just for peace. They both looked up, wary but silent. First, I said, I don't want apologies that start with excuses. I've heard enough of those. If you ever want to talk about the past, talk about it honestly. Mom nodded weakly, tears slipping down her cheeks. Second, I continued, no more pretending I'm fragile. I'm not. You don't need to worry about me or tell people I'm managing. I'm more than managing. I'm thriving. Let me own that. Dad looked down at his hands, jaw tightening, not in anger, but in shame. Third, I said quietly, if you want to be part of my future, my wedding, my life, it has to come from respect, not guilt. No controlling, no judgment, no underestimating me again. Just show up and mean it. The words hung in the air like a soft verdict. Mom nodded, wiping her tears. We can do that, Ava. I promise we can. I studied her face for a moment. For the first time, she wasn't defensive. She was just a woman realizing her daughter had grown beyond her imagination. Dad finally spoke, voice low. You built something real, kid. Didn't think I'd ever say it, but I'm proud of you. That sentence hit deeper than I expected. For a moment, I had to steady my breath. I know, I whispered. That's all I ever wanted. Not your money, not your approval. Just that. Silence again, but this time it felt warm. Softer. They stayed for another hour, helping me sort through wedding samples, flipping through fabric swatches, even laughing a little. Nothing was fully healed, but something had shifted. As they left, Mom hugged me tight. You really did it all, didn't you? I smiled. Yeah. And it was worth it. When the door closed behind them, I looked out over the city again. The skyline glowed in the late afternoon light, and for the first time, it didn't feel like it was above me. It felt like it was mine. The morning of my wedding arrived quietly. No chaos, no shouting relatives, just sunlight pouring through the curtains and the faint hum of a city that had watched me grow up from the sidewalks. I sat at my vanity, smoothing a curl that refused to stay pinned. My dress hung near the window, simple, elegant, paid in full months ago. No borrowed money, no guilt stitched into the seams. Behind me, Mom and Dad stood together, helping with final touches. It still felt surreal, seeing them calm, present, softer. Something in them had changed since that afternoon. Maybe it was understanding, maybe pride, maybe both. Mom adjusted my veil and smiled through her tears. You know, she said quietly, I used to worry you were too independent for your own good. I laughed softly. Guess I proved that wrong. You did, she whispered. And I'm glad. Dad didn't say much, but when he met my eyes through the mirror, there was something I hadn't seen since I was a little girl. Respect. Real, wordless respect. When they left to find their seats, I took one last look around the room. My flowers, my notes, my vows. All exactly as I'd planned. Every detail was proof of what 16-year-old me had promised herself. Earn your peace. I reached into my bag and pulled out the tiny silver keychain. The heart charm had dulled over the years, but the engraving was still clear. Earn your peace. I held it tightly, feeling the weight of everything that led me here. The exhaustion, the rejections, the nights of doubt, the victories no one witnessed. And then I smiled, because this wasn't just a wedding day. It was a quiet declaration that I had built an entire life without depending on anyone's permission. As the music began outside, I took a deep breath and whispered to myself, "You did it, Ava. You earned it." I slipped the keychain into my bouquet, a secret reminder of the girl who started it all. Then, as I walked toward the door, my heels clicking softly against the floor, my voice, calm, sure, unshaken, filled the silence of my own story. Working since 16, never asked for a dime, paid off my education, planned my entire wedding, and somewhere between all that, I built a life I don't need saving from. Fade out.